And good Friday morning. My name is Ryan Belmore. I'm the owner and publisher of What's Up Noop. And joining me here on this beautiful Friday morning, beautiful for November, is Mr. Frank Prozitz. And hello, Frank.
Yeah. Good morning, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing okay. It's interesting. We've been doing this author series, and we're hearing from a lot of Rhode Island authors, which is fun and exciting. And as I put in our newsletter this morning, 5 weeks until Christmas from today. And the next 5 weeks, it is more important than ever in your life, in anybody's life, to shop local. And, so as we talk about these books, I want to mention it now. And as we talk about other music and products and shop local, the local mom and pop shops, I know it's a saying every Christmas, every holiday season. This year is more important than ever to support those stores.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're really blessed in Rhode Island to have as much talent as we have. Individuals who, everything from nonfiction, obviously, to fiction, poetry. It's tremendous. And this time, particularly, when we're going through this coronavirus stuff, what better thing to do than to, instead of sitting on your couch and watching Netflix, sit in a chair and read a book. That's great. And some terrific books. We're really pleased today that we have second in our author series, G. Wayne Miller, Providence Journal reporter for, I think it's about 112 years, something like that, right?
I think it's 150 actually, but
yeah, it must
but
be
who's counting, right? Who's counting?
Yeah, I have to say this, Wayne. I downloaded your bio. There is no bio that I know of that has more pages than this bio. Unbelievable. Wayne, Harvard grad, and has gone on to a very distinguished career at the Journal. Has done a number of things including 19 books at this point.
Correct. Yeah, 19 published and a few in the trunk still.
Maybe and a mixture of fiction and nonfiction.
That's correct.
And one coming out, right? Or that just did come out.
This one just came out. Blue Hill. Got the glare off.
Yeah.
It's a novel, so obviously it's fiction. And it's set in the 1990s, back in the dial-up era, back when things were, you wrote and stored on floppy disks and whatnot. And it's a sort of a mystery and sort of a thriller, but it's really about a man who needs to discover truth both about himself and about his past and about his present. So he goes on a long journey, and this is after he becomes one of America's most wanted criminals for a crime that actually he didn't commit, although he doesn't know that. So it's sort of a departure for me. Most of my other fiction has been horror. I've done short story collections of horror. Thunder Rise, which was actually my first published book, was a horror novel. So this is a departure. This is just pure nonfiction.
Wayne, let me go back a bit before you started any of this. Was this always your objective, always your belief that you would end up becoming a journalist / author? And I'm not sure which comes first.
I don't know which comes first either. Well, I will tell you, and I've told this story before, that at a relatively young age, third or fourth grade, I began writing on my own fiction. It was obviously fourth or fifth grade or third or fourth grade level fiction, but something I began just doing on my own. And I sometimes joke that maybe I did it to escape the rigid Catholicism of my upbringing in parochial school, but I always liked to write. And when I got to high school, one of the first things that I did was get published in our high school newspaper. I eventually became co-editor of my high school newspaper, writing both fiction and nonfiction. I was writing horror actually for that. And that led to, my career. I went to Harvard, as you mentioned. I majored in English there, got out of Harvard, graduated, wanted nothing more than to write, but I couldn't get a job immediately. This is back in the 1970s. I wrote to endless newspapers, literally letters. And if anybody wrote back, it was a form rejection. Sorry, we don't want you. Sorry, we don't want you. So I took a job at Logan Airport, smashing bags for Delta Airlines while I continued to freelance write. And eventually I got hired by a small newspaper in North Adams, by one of the legendary editors in New England journalism, Rhode, now retired. He took a shot at me. And then he never, and this is a funny story. The first day I showed up, I had actually gone to, I think it was a Kmart, and bought notebooks. I didn't even know that when you worked at a newspaper, they gave you notebooks. I had never taken a course in journalism, certainly had not I knew nothing about it. So I arrived in North Adams, Massachusetts, out in the Berkshires, and showed up my first day with my notebooks. And I offered to buy everyone coffee in the newsroom. And Rod Doherty said, "That's a mistake. You'll never make that one again," because everyone, of course, wanted coffee. And so it was a great learning experience. 9 months there, I kind of refer to it as my journalism 101. I had some great colleagues, Rod Doherty, other editors, went to the Cape Cod Times, and then Peter Gosselin. Frank, you probably remember Peter Gosselin.
Sure, I remember Peter. We worked together.
Yeah. He was at the North Adams Transcript, and he had come to the Journal. We had stayed in touch, and he suggested, "Why don't you come here? It's a writer's newspaper." And so I came in 1981, and well, I'm still here.
Yeah. And you're doing, from the journalism standpoint, some of the more substantive stories, the more in-depth things on a lot of, on much of it human interest stuff.
Yeah, and that, again, I've been lucky to have been supported by a lot of good editors here at the Journal right from the start, who have given me room to write in-depth stories on many different topics, many different people. They've given me the time. Early on, my journalistic passion became mental health. And so I started covering mental health. This was back when Joel Rawson was the managing editor. Jim Wyman was the executive editor. Back in the mid-1980s, when the Institute of Mental Health, you may remember that, out at the Howard Complex, it was conditions there were improving, but it was still essentially a warehouse where people went and their lives were, cruelly lost. They received barbaric treatment. Anyway, I lived there actually for a week to write a story. You wouldn't be able to do that today with HIPAA. And I've continued that passion to today. And of course, now since March, we've been mainly writing about the coronavirus. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Oh, I was just going to say, of course, closer to home and, decades later, people may know you, people may see you around Newport because Story in the Public Square.
Correct. And I've been a visiting fellow at the Pell Center at Salve, Regina University for, I think, around 8 years now. And that's been a great relationship, a great place for me to be. I co-founded the Story in the Public Square program. We now have and have had for several years a national PBS TV show, Story in the Public Square. We're coast to coast. It's also on Sirius XM satellite radio. We're in 80+% of the markets in the country. And, every week in this market, it's Rhode Island PBS 11 o'clock on Sundays, and then repeated 7:30 on Thursdays. We have a great array of storytellers from academia, from politics, from journalism, film people, poets, artists. It's been a great experience.
Does it look a lot like this?
Well, now it does, yeah. And actually, your backdrops here are better than a lot that we see. Trust me. But actually, one of the quote unquote blessings of the pandemic, and that's really not the right word, but we are now able to get people from all over the country. Prior to that, when we were recording in our flagship studio, Rhode Island PBS, we would fly people in or have them come by train or whatever. And because of budgetary limitations, we were pretty much limited to this side of the Mississippi. And now, now we get a lot of people from Los Angeles and basically anywhere we want. So, it's really up to the quality of our guests. Not that the quality was bad to begin with. We've always had, a great selection of people willing to come on, and they and our audience and our crew, deserve all the credit for the success we've had. Nothing to do with Jim Ludis and me. Jim's my co-host, and he runs the Pell Center.
Wayne, what's the basic premise of the public story on the public square, and what are you hoping that viewers take from it?
Well, we want storytelling from people who have some impact in the public square, meaning civic issues, meaning potentially or often politics. The public square, really in the old-fashioned sense of the word, the public square, when people in colonial times and revolutionary times would come into the public square, such as downtown Newport in front of Colony House, and would hear from people about the issues of the day. Now, I don't think they had any filmmakers since there was no film then. I don't know if they had poets, but they did have, leading people from the time. And so that's really our model. We want to have a public discussion of issues that are of importance to people. And also we like to, get people who entertain, who make us laugh. We have I was watching TV a few weeks ago, and Gina Brion, have you ever heard of her? She has an Amazon special. She's a stand-up comic. So my wife and I were surfing around, and we just happened to find this thing on Amazon. And from the moment we started watching it, we literally cried. So great comic. I think she's coming up in a week or two. She is from the Bronx, New York. So we also like to, but she has important messages as well. It's not just, doing jokes without some quote unquote deeper meaning. So we like to entertain. We like to hear from great people.
I want to go back to your novels and your nonfiction.
Sure.
What is it that drew you to horror?
Good question. And I think the best answer is I started reading Edgar Allan Poe freshman year in high school. Had not read him. Again, I went to parochial school up in Massachusetts, and parochial school in the 1960s, as you may have heard or may know, or could be a rather tough experience growing up. So we were not allowed to read anything like Poe. So I never even had really heard of Edgar Allan Poe, but I had an English teacher freshman year, John Farrington, and he was a marvelous person. Just sort of opened our eyes to all kinds of possibilities, including other kinds of fiction, including Edgar Allan Poe. And this was at a Catholic prep school, St. John's Prep in Danvers, which really was earth-shattering or shifted my whole worldview from this small little town in Massachusetts, parochial school upbringing, to opening your eyes to bigger and better things. So that's where my fascination with horror began at the age of 14.
Where do you draw the subject matter from? I know some of it comes from some of your reporting at the Journal, and others must come from other episodes in your life.
It's a curious question. Where do you get your ideas? Stephen King, who is my favorite writer and has been ever since I first read him many, many, many years ago, before he was Stephen King as we know him now. He was once asked that question, where do you get your ideas? And he said, Utica, as in Utica, New York. And he was being Stephen King, smartass. My answer is they come from many different places. From the imagination, from daydreaming, which, by the way, is not necessarily the best habit, depending on whether you're driving or not. And certainly from the real world, some from my reporting, as you mentioned, some from just reading about events in the news, but really just, from the imagination. And I do not profess to understand the process in any great depth. I just know that ideas occur. And I have, I mentioned trunk novels before. I have not a literal trunk, but a Dropbox trunk full of ideas and short stories I've never finished, and at this point probably never will, books that I've never finished. For me, it's just, it's a fantasy and a place sometimes, often, to escape.
When writing and when choosing between fiction and nonfiction, do you have a favorite, or they both just judge differently?
That's really probably the way to put it. They're two different crafts, as it were. What I like about writing nonfiction as a journalist is you have an opportunity to inform people on important issues. I would refer again to mental health. I've probably written more stories about mental health issues and people than any other topic. So that is, in a public service sense, very, very important to me. What I like about fiction is you make it up. Now, obviously, if you're setting in a certain time and era, as I did in the 1990s with Blue Hill, you have to be true to the actual events of that time. But beyond that, the characters, the people, what they say, you have no limitations. You don't have to, I don't want to say you don't have to hit a certain standard of truth, because in fiction, there is truth. Sometimes you can tell truths more deeply in fiction, but it's from your imagination. If, for example, the character, the protagonist in Blue Hill, if I want him to say something, he says it. So you have a greater degree of control. That sounds sort of harsh, I guess, control, but you also don't have an editor at a newspaper saying, you know what, where the F did that come from?
Yeah.
Can you go back and check your source, please?
I've heard that occasionally.
Yeah, haven't we all?
Wayne, we are staring down at 9 months of this COVID-19 pandemic. As an author, do you think people are taking the opportunity that they have while locked in their home to read more, or to dive back into books, or to purchase or share more?
I absolutely do, and I believe that, and I know that both from personal experience and also what I've been reading about the big publishers, Simon & Schuster, Penguin, Random House. They're all seeing, there was an initial pause. I want to, pause is maybe not the right word, given that we're about to go into a pause, but there was a period in March and April when publishing wasn't sure what it would do, how it could do it, would they even survive? And coming out of that, after the first surge began to subside, at least here in the Northeast, sales started to skyrocket, Kindle, but also physical sales of physical books. And today, I think there's, that's the silver lining for these publishers, big and small, and also for, hopefully for independent bookstores. You mentioned that you're big fans of local bookstores, and so am I as well. And so I would urge, whether you want to read my stuff or anyone's stuff, go to your local bookstores. But there's no question that during the pandemic, people are reading more because they're looking for escape, they have time, and they need to do something that is rewarding and enriching to themselves. And I think children are probably reading more too, or at least with their parents.
I was speaking with an owner of somebody is opening a new bookstore here in Newport on Broadway.
Really?
Charter Books.
Oh, wow.
And it's in, for those from Newport watching, it's in the former Hope restaurant. And
yeah, I know where that is. Sure.
Yeah. So right across from Fastnet Pub and all that area, opening a brand new bookstore, redoing the building. And, they're eyeing a late winter opening. But what they're doing right now is you can order on their website, you can either pick it up right at their front door, or they'll ship it to your house. And they're seeing people just buy books after books after books. So even in that way, if you don't want to go into a physical bookstore, you can still buy it from a bookstore, either by phone or online. So support those local mom and pops. They need it.
Yeah, no, I'll have to check out that bookstore. It sounds great. Do they have a website up yet? They probably do.
They do. And I'll get it to you right here in a minute.
Okay. So speaking of local bookstores and writers, I want to make mention of an event that's coming up 7 o'clock on December 10th. The What Cheer Writers Club in Providence, I'm sure you're familiar with them, is hosting a virtual conversation with 5 Rhode Island authors, including me, Padma Venkatraman, who is just a marvelously gifted best-selling author, John Land, I'm sure you know John Land, Vanessa Lilly, who's had 2 bestsellers, and one other person that we haven't yet gotten a total commitment from, so I won't mention her name, but I think she'll be in on it. Anyway, it's going to be moderated by Bill Bartholomew, and so it should be a fun evening. I'm going to, urge people to check in. We'll have something up soon on Eventbrite and other places so people can check it out. But again, support your local authors and particularly support your local bookstores. And not that I have anything against Amazon and Barnes and Noble, but let's go local.
Wayne, let me ask you about your feeling about audiobooks versus the hardcover or softcover book, the actual physical book.
I'm a big fan of the actual physical book. But I know a lot of people, particularly in this era of podcasting, when you want to listen, I know a lot of people are huge fans of audiobooks. I have listened to a couple of my audiobooks, and I'm very pleased with the people we've had. We got a great narrator for Blue Hill, but I'm more inclined toward the physical book and less to the Kindle and audio. But I know that many people love both of those formats, and they're great, particularly in the audiobook, particularly if you're just lying around or even driving, or I guess you can't go to the gym right away, but for those purposes.
Yeah, I do a lot of audiobooks, and it depends. Some books are fine audio, some are just really meant to be read, and shouldn't be done in audio. And a lot depends upon the reader.
Yeah, and I've been offered the opportunity to narrate my own books, and when I saw the time commitment involved, it was like, there's no way on earth I can do that. The narrator for Blue Hill, I couldn't even tell you how many hours he must have spent narrating it, because not only do you narrate, you have to correct any errors, or if you got something a little bit wrong, the tone was wrong, you have to re-record. His name is Justin Kawamoto, and he's an American of Japanese descent. I think he was in Berlin, actually, of all places, when he narrated this. But the time commitment is so huge, I could not possibly do it. I mean, it's days and days.
Mitch Albom records his own books.
Does he really?
Yeah.
I'm guessing Stephen King probably has at least one of his books. I mean, he's got so many damn books. He couldn't possibly narrate them. He's got like 50 plus books. He'd have to live to 300 to narrate all those.
That bookstore is chartbookstore.com, and I just searched your name, and they have it looks like a couple dozen of your books, Wayne. So you'll have to check them out. So chartbookstore.com, and if you search your name, you see everything that you've ever edited or anything that you've ever written right there. So
I'll have to drive
database. Yeah,
I'll have to drive down and buy some of my own books.
There you go.
Besides Stephen King, some of the authors that you most admire, or maybe even try to emulate?
Well, in the nonfiction world, I'm going to name two people, and actually both of these have been guests on Story in the Public Square. One of them is Dan Barry of the New York Times.
Oh, sure. Formerly of the Providence Journal. Formerly
of the Providence Journal. There is no better nonfiction writer than Dan Barry, just an astounding writer. I learned from him. And then Chris Chivers, C.J. Chivers, who wrote The Fighters, again, another New York Times writer, another Providence Journal alum. Right. He was in the Marines. He rose to the rank of captain, and at the age of 30, he went to Columbia Journalism School to become a journalist. But he was embedded in Afghanistan and Iraq several times while writing for the New York Times. And again, just a stunning writer. He happens to live in Rhode Island, which is quite interesting, South Kingstown. So those are two of my absolute favorite nonfiction writers. Fiction, again, Stephen King. Unfortunately, I don't have the time I wish I had to read more books. It's one of the things I'm looking forward to at some point. But between my own writing, the TV show, and covering the coronavirus, which is not a 7.5 hour shift every day, I can tell you that it's a real commitment. And plus, I have a personal life which I have to attend to as well.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you what your take is on the state of journalism today and the assault on journalism by certain political forces?
I think that the assault, to use your word, on journalism is misguided. I think it has created a situation where many people are not sure of what truth is or isn't, don't know where to go to find facts and truths. And it's, in terms of the republic and in terms of democracy, I won't call it a fatal blow. It's not a fatal blow. I think eventually we'll come out of this period, but it's a serious harm to this discourse, to democracy, and to what people should know and learn to, to be citizens and people, with compassion and empathy. So that's in terms of the disinformation. In terms of journalism, as we know, many local papers have gone away or have gone to, just a few days a week or completely online. I think that's a very regrettable development. I wish that weren't happening. Having said that, there are some bright spots. There are nonprofit newspapers and media outlets that are doing great work. I think that our own chain, USA Today Network, which now is the owner of the Providence Journal, is doing a very commendable job in the quality of their journalism and in their reach to people. So there are bright spots. Obviously, the New York Times is thriving because you can get truth there. The Washington Post is doing very well. I think the Wall Street Journal is doing well. The LA Times. So there are bright spots, but it's a red flag has gone up, and I think we need to pay attention to that.
Are younger people gravitating towards journalism, or has all of this, I'm going to call it controversy, but it's not, has that pushed people away from the profession?
Frank, that's a great question. And we've had a couple of people on Story in the Public Square who have addressed that, including Mike Stanton, another journal alum who's at the University of Connecticut, a professor there. And what they tell us is that there has never been more interest in journalism among young people than now. And so the journalism schools and classes are full. Now, they're not all heading into print journalism. Some are going into broadcast journalism. Some of them are going into online reporting. But and it's with these young people that, I think we have to place our faith, not just in journalism, but in society in general. When you look around at the pandemic and the political gridlock and all of that is happening, I often say that I find faith in young people. The young people today who are going to be the leaders tomorrow, politically in journalism and whatnot. So I always get refreshed thinking about that. Anyway, very long way of answering your question. There's never been more interest. It's almost like the Woodward and Bernstein era, which is
I remember that one.
Yeah, which is one of the things that got me attracted to journalism. So there's not an analogy precisely in terms of those two people, but there's great enthusiasm among young people to get into this field, and God bless them.
And there is another bright spot is we belong to a national organization, journalism organization called Local Independent Online News Publishers. And there's currently 334 online news publishers that live up to certain standards. And a lot of former journalists who worked for newspapers who are running them, a lot of younger folks who graduated with journalism degrees. A lot of them, thankfully, are serving news deserts that are out there. And, so you don't need to look far to know that the big entire picture of journalism isn't dying. It's there. It just looks different than 20 years ago.
Yeah, no, and Brian, a very good point. And I just want to give a shout out to your site. I've become more familiar with it over the past few months. And, it's a great example of local journalism, the kind of thing we need. So congratulations. I know you keep building your audience, and I can see why. So keep up the great work. I appreciate that. Well, it's a heartfelt, truthful comment. No disinformation there.
Yeah, and we've drawn a few former journal people in, myself and Brian Jones, and
my good friend Brian. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That's great.
We've become a sanctuary for the retirees of Providence Journal. But a nursing home.
now that we can't meet as a group once a month over, someday you'll get there, Wayne.
Yeah, well, that's true. So, God willing, someday I will.
Yeah, yeah, but it is I often sit there and I look around that table and I realize what amazing talent sits around that table and was covering news in Rhode Island.
You're talking about the Geezers Club, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, can't meet at cellos anymore. Are you guys meeting virtually or?
We're not meeting. So I think there's some virtual stuff, but not a lot. And every once in a while I hear from Mullen Levin about as eventually we'll get together again.
Yeah, I saw a lot of. I never went to one of those, but I saw a lot of the photographs. And Carol Young, of course, was there often. Joe Rawson even showed up.
No, Joe. We've had everybody show up. At one point, Fraser Smith come up from Baltimore. Bill Salgana.
I saw that. I know. I saw that.
So when we get back to the books, give me a reason why people should consider giving books as a gift this holiday season, as well as, who might be the perfect recipient of some of your books.
Well, give books because you'll support authors, you'll support bookstores, and you'll give joy and entertainment and information and knowledge potentially to people you like and love. It's really the time-honored reason to give books is people will appreciate it, and now probably more than ever. In terms of my own books, I guess I would say if you're interested in horror or mystery or sci-fi or, Blue Hill, which is kind of a thriller, but also sort of a journey into a man's past where he finds secrets and has to reconcile with things he did wrong and did right, did wrong, actually. And also, by the way, in Blue Hill, we were talking about fiction versus nonfiction. One of the minor characters in Blue Hill is Jack Nicholson, who is somebody that I long appreciated as an actor. Now, you couldn't write a nonfiction piece and bring Jack Nicholson in the way I did here, but because of imagination, there he is in that book. So, again, if your nonfiction is your thing, I would recommend among my books, Toy Wars, which was a bestseller, and the sequel, Kid Number One. And those are two books about Hasbro and Alan Hassenfeld and Al Verrecchia and very well-known Rhode Island names. King of Hearts, which is probably the book dearest to my own heart, pardon the pun, is a book that was about the person who invented essentially open heart surgery. And I wrote that actually, with a movie in mind. Hasn't happened yet. You know how that goes in terms of Hollywood. But anyway, those are a couple I'd recommend. But the people I mentioned before who are going to be on this December 10th, What Cheer Writers Club, Padma Venkatraman, who lives in Narragansett, great writer. John Land, a great writer. Michael Fine, who is somebody I know. He used to be the head of the Department of Health. He's a marvelous writer. We have a lot of great writers here in Rhode Island. Vanessa Lilly, I mentioned.
Yeah, we had Bruce DeSilva, who came out of the Journal also.
Oh, yeah, Bruce, absolutely. Yeah. So there's a lot of homegrown talent here, as it were. So, but you can't go wrong giving a book.
Wayne, I'm going to throw out one last question for me, and
Sure.
a belief that I've had, and I like to read historical fiction a lot, but I sometimes believe when I read a history book, I'll read about a point in time, and when I read historical fiction, it gives me a little bit more understanding of what the soul of that society is. Half a Yellow Sun. I don't know if you're familiar with that book about the Biafran War, but you trace a family, and going through that, and all of the historical points are correct, but there are the emotional points that you really don't get out of some of these other books. So I like to say that the arts really allow you to discover the soul of a society.
That's very well put, beautifully put, and so true. It's what I was saying earlier. You can get at certain truths perhaps better in fiction than you can in nonfiction. And what you mentioned in terms of the emotions of people, what was in their minds, what was in their hearts and in their souls, can be done quite well in fiction. So I agree with you 100%.
Ryan, anything else? I think I'm good. And Wayne, I think it's just great to have you on this morning.
Hey, Frank, thanks so much. Great to see you again after all these years.
Yeah,
Ryan,
indeed.
thanks again. Good luck with everything you do. And check out Story in the Public Square every Sunday, 11 o'clock on Rhode Island PBS. It's a great show.
Excellent. Don't forget to take some time for yourself and slow down and take a break from all this that you're doing right now, Wayne.
I wish I could. I do sometimes. I'm planning to tomorrow. Let's put it that way.
There
You go. All right. And you can find all of Wayne's books as well as more about Story in the Public Square, more about him. gwaynemiller.com and is the place to go. We will see you around Newport and hopefully we'll get together sometime soon.
Absolutely. Stay safe, guys, and everyone listening here. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Wayne.
All right. Thank you, Wayne. All right, Mr. Prosnitz, there is our conversation with another author.
Right. And we will, we'll announce some more coming up that we need to schedule. I've talked to Bruce DeSilva. We've got to get him scheduled in. Dr. Barbara Roberts, she'll be coming on. She's wrote Dr. Bro. So we'll have a number of them coming on over the next few weeks.
Excellent. All right. Well, I appreciate it. We'll chat with you soon.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. On behalf of Frank Prosnitz and myself and all of you, what's up, news? Thank you for joining us today's conversation. gwaynemiller.com for more information about him, Story in the Square, his books, and more. You can find it all right there. Remember, if you see one of his books, I'm sure he has plenty of links up on his website. Try to give a call to your local bookstore or local mom and pop shop this holiday season. Give the gift of books this holiday season. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next time, whatever it may be. Thanks. Hi, Frank.
How you doing?
Bye, Frank.